Beast of Reincarnation might just look like yet another title in a sea of fantasy and reincarnation stories, but the truth is, there are hidden details that a lot of people missed. Behind the intense battles and engaging narrative, there are fascinating trivia points that make the game even more interesting. In this video, you are going to discover 10 facts that probably nobody told you about, and that can completely change the way you view this game. One of the things that caught my attention the most in Beast of Reincarnation was precisely who is behind the project. Game Freak, known worldwide for Pokémon, has always been associated with a lighter, colorful, and more accessible style. Because of that, seeing the studio diving headfirst into a completely different concept already makes this game something I cannot ignore. What we are seeing here is not just an aesthetic change, but almost a complete reinvention of the studio's identity. Beast of Reincarnation abandons that childlike vibe and embraces a dark, more mature, and dense fantasy, something rarely associated with Game Freak. This shows a clear willingness to explore new audiences and prove that they can go way beyond what they have done for decades. Another point that further reinforces this transformation is the use of Unreal Engine 5. The visual leap is absurd, featuring much more detailed environments, realistic lighting, and a heavy atmosphere that perfectly matches the game's premise. You can tell there is a greater focus on immersion and visual impact, something that wasn't the main focus in the studio's more traditional titles. To me, this shift represents a decisive moment in Game Freak's history. It's not just a new game, it's almost an identity test, an attempt to show they can reinvent themselves and surprise everyone. If Beast of Reincarnation delivers what it promises, it could mark the beginning of a brand new phase for the studio. In this game, the setting is Japan in the year 4026. Completely different from everything we know today. It's not just a distant future, it is practically another world, shaped by centuries of destruction and transformation. What makes this even more interesting is the origin of this collapse. The so-called blight, a biological parasite, not only destroyed civilization as we know it, but also blended flora and fauna in bizarre and dangerous ways. This creates an environment that feels alive, unpredictable, and hostile all the time, as if the world itself were against you. And the heaviest part of all is realizing that humanity has practically vanished. This isn't your typical post-apocalyptic scenario full of survivors fighting for resources. Here, the feeling is one of loneliness, of an absolute end. This completely changes the tone of the narrative, making everything more melancholic and even reflective. This type of setting greatly elevates the game's potential. It's not just about combat or exploration, but about understanding what is left of the world and what it means to exist within it. This devastated futuristic Japan seems to hold a lot of hidden history, and I am curious to discover every single detail. Nowadays, many RPGs try to stretch themselves out as much as possible, sometimes even beyond what is necessary, but here the approach feels more direct and well-planned. The estimate of 30 to 40 hours already gives me the feeling of a more focused experience without any unnecessary padding. The game bets on linear open-world regions, which to me is a great balance. It's not that completely open world where you get lost in 1,000 side activities, but it's also not completely rigid. It feels like the kind of design that guides you, but still gives you enough freedom to explore and enjoy the environment. I really like it when a game knows exactly how long it needs to tell its story. These 30 to 40 hours suggest that the narrative can be better paced, without having to stretch content just to inflate the total playtime. This usually results in more memorable moments and less repetition. To me, this makes Beast of Reincarnation even more interesting, because it shows a more conscious approach. Instead of trying to be gigantic at any cost, the game seems focused on delivering a solid experience from start to finish. And honestly, sometimes that is exactly what makes an RPG stand out. Beast of Reincarnation is coming straight to Game Pass on day one. To me, this completely changes how we look at this type of release, especially being a new action RPG with such a different concept. The fact that it will be available on Xbox Game Pass and PC Game Pass right on the first day makes access much easier. Instead of having to invest immediately in the game, many people will be able to test it, try it out, and decide for themselves if it's worth continuing. This opens doors for a much larger audience. At the same time, the game won't be limited to a single platform, since it will also be released for PlayStation 5 and PC. This shows a very interesting strategy, reaching as many players as possible without trapping the experience inside a single ecosystem. This only increases the relevance of Beast of Reincarnation. Being available on day one on Game Pass can help the game gain a lot of visibility right off the bat, And if it truly delivers on its promises, it has everything it takes to become one of those titles everyone will be talking about. One thing I found interesting is the way the combat was designed. It's not that traditional system you already expect from an action RPG. Here, they mix the speed of a hack and slash with more strategic elements, almost like a tactical turn-based RPG. In practice, this means you won't just go around attacking mindlessly. Real-time katana combat brings that agile and intense feeling, but at the same time, there's a layer of strategy that forces you to make more calculated decisions during fights. This combination can make everything much more dynamic. Another interesting detail is the use of coup, which introduces tactical commands right in the middle of the action. This creates a sort of mental pause in combat, where you have to think about your next move instead of simply reacting. It's almost like switching between reflexes and strategy all the time. I think this mix has everything it takes to be one of the game's major differentiating factors. If it works well, it can offer a unique experience that breaks the mold and keeps combat constantly interesting, not just because of the action, but also because of how you need to think while playing. Beast of Reincarnation blends fast-paced action with a tactical pause in a very elegant way. While Emma fights in real time with her sword, the game slows down when you need to command coup, and that gives you the feeling that you are always in control of the battle, even in the middle of chaos. The detail that catches my attention the most is that this mechanic doesn't feel like a mere interface trick, because it directly connects the pace of the fight with coup's function. You strike, parry, build up points, and then use that slow-motion moment to choose bloom arts more calmly, almost as if the game lets you breathe before unleashing your next heavy strike. I really love it when an action RPG does this. Instead of turning combat into a pure rush, it creates a brief strategic pause that makes you think better. In practice, this makes the system more stylish and also smarter, because the player isn't just reacting on instinct, they are planning their next step with intent. And honestly, this type of mechanic fits a game that wants to combine a sword, a companion, and strategy all in one package. It gives the impression that Beast of Reincarnation doesn't just want to be fast or pretty, but wants to make you feel like every decision in combat carries weight. And that is the kind of thing that makes me pay attention to a new action RPG. From what has been shown, you control Emma, but the game practically forces you to think of the wolf as a central part of the fight, because ignoring his orders seems like a quick way to complicate everything. I like this a lot because it shifts the combat mindset. Instead of playing as if it were just an ordinary hack and slash, you enter a dynamic of genuine partnership, where every decision involving coup truly matters, especially when things get tough against bosses or large groups of enemies. And I appreciate this precisely because it builds identity. This concept of a one-person, one-dog action RPG conveys the feeling that Emma's strength lies not just in her sword, but in how she works together with her companion. When a game makes the partner genuinely essential, the combat gains more layers and becomes much more memorable. Ultimately, this is the part that stood out to me the most. It doesn't feel like a game where you can simply mash attack and move forward. It feels like an action RPG that wants to force you to respect coup. And to me, that is the kind of design that makes everything more tense, more strategic, and way more interesting to follow. Beast of Reincarnation takes several strong ideas from massive games and tries to bring them all together in a way that makes sense within its own combat system. When a game is compared to Sekiro, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Nier, Automata, and Stellar Blade, you can already tell it doesn't want to be just another generic action RPG. The Sekiro influence stands out mainly because of precise blocking and posture breaking, which makes every encounter tenser and more technical. I really like it when a game rewards those who learn the rhythm of a fight, because then winning doesn't feel like just a matter of brute force, but of reading, patience, and timing. Meanwhile, the inspiration from Final Fantasy VII Remake and Stellar Blade gives me that feeling of more dynamic combat, with windows for tactical commands without losing action fluidity. This is interesting because it keeps the fight from turning into a mere button-mashing festival, while also preventing the game from locking the player into a system that is too slow. This mix leaves me curious precisely because it can give the game a distinct identity of its own. If it manages to unite Sekiro's precision with the tactical agility of those other games, Beast of Reincarnation could end up being one of those action RPGs that feel familiar at first, but gain real personality once you actually start playing. Beast of Reincarnation is born with a very clear identity. By introducing this concept of a one-person, one-dog action RPG, it creates the feeling that the game doesn't just want to place a companion next to the heroine, but rather make the partnership between Emma and Ku the center of everything. To me, this makes the combat much more interesting, because Emma appears to be the most direct and aggressive part of the action, while Ku steps in as the tactical layer that shifts the rhythm of the fight. I really enjoy it when a game manages to unite that feeling of real-time impact with moments where you pause and think before acting. And this time pause command system catches my attention precisely because it reminds me of things that work very well in other RPG styles, but adapted here for a more modern action setup. This can make the game more dynamic without losing depth, because you aren't just spamming attack the whole time, you actually have to coordinate the duo. This is the part that leaves me most curious. Beast of Reincarnation seems to want to build a combat system where strength comes not just from the protagonist, but from how she fights alongside Ku. When a game nails that balance, it gains true personality, and that is exactly what makes me want to see how this idea will work in practice. Man, this idea of Emma using her own hair as a weapon and a tool is one of those concepts that practically sells the game on its own. It's not just a different aesthetic detail, it's a mechanic that feels truly integrated with everything: combat, exploration, and movement. And that grabs my attention because when an action RPG manages to make a core ability serve every purpose, the gameplay usually becomes much more fluid and creative. In combat, I can only imagine how much space this opens up for different fighting styles. It's not just about hitting or dodging. You can attack from a distance, trap enemies, control space. Depending on how the system is built, you can have an absurd variety of builds or approaches. And since it is organic, like vines, it matches that wild, somewhat corrupted style the game seems to want to convey. Now, where this can really shine is in exploration. Using hair to create platforms, climb, or propel yourself through the air completely changes how we navigate the world. It's not just walking and jumping, it turns into a freer, more inventive kind of parkour. If the level design keeps up with this, well, it could be the kind of game where you look at a spot and think, I can get up there, but how am I going to use my abilities to do it? And the most interesting part is how this connects with the character's identity. It's not just some random power, it's something that feels like a part of her condition as a Blightborn. That gives it greater narrative weight, you know? It's not just gameplay for the sake of gameplay, it's mechanics helping to tell who she is. And when a game manages to bring those things together, it usually becomes much more memorable.